Moana Exiles, Talkative Try here, and holy Path of Exile 2 brand new info galore. This video contains a bunch of awesome stuff, from surprising new gameplay knowledge revealed in a huge Jonathan Rogers interview with some Korean creators, and another possible last-minute closed beta test, to a shocking series of events that led us to knowing traditional games media, which is a term being used very broadly, received early access to Path of Exile 2. I am here to report on it all in a single video as concisely and as entertainingly as I can. That's right, Path of Exile 2 news aggregator Try at your service once more. It is an honor, Exiles. Here's a high-level list of what new info this video contains. The best insights from the packed Korean Jonathan Rogers interview, including news on a microtransaction preview in the game, new thoughts on endgame boss fights, the fact that the Mirror of Kalandra does exist in PoE 2, and just how strong melee combat feels to testers. A rundown on the Fextralife supposedly accidental review leak, and how or why some people have advanced copies of Path of Exile 2. Brief discussion about two classes and their power on early access launch. The supposed next closed beta test for PoE 2 running from the 3rd to the 6th of December. Some interesting developer insights from Viperesque, including the fact that maxing your resistances is an endgame pursuit, and the best Path of Exile 2 early access memes so far. Before we get into the belly of the beast of the video, please like it if you like my content, subscribe to the channel for all things Path of Exile 2, and hit the sub notification bell. These past few days still have been the most successful for the channel ever. I'd like to keep the momentum going forever. Thank you. Now, let's delve on in. Let's begin with the best insights from the Korean Jonathan Rogers interview. The link to it is in the description below. It is in Korean and English. First of all, Jonathan feels like Path of Exile 2 is 90% of the way to being the perfect ARPG in Jonathan's eyes. Of course, all the content isn't there yet, but the gameplay feel to him is superb. He reiterated that early access is going to last for a minimum of 6 months, but no longer than a year. This is something he also said in my interview. They are keen in launching Path of Exile's 1.0 version, meaning the free-to-play version, by December of 2025. It is an ambitious task, especially given all the content they're going to put into the game. They said they're going to double it, and all the gameplay balances, all the new classes. I mean, it's going to be wild to see the update cadence, which he also reiterated in this interview, will be every couple of months. He also said Path of Exile 2 we will be getting more sequel versions of Path of Exile 1 leagues and updated versions of all their associated systems, including crafting systems. It's very interesting to think about which leagues will make the cut. Are we going to see Harvest, which is a favorite of mine, and that crafting system updated? Are we going to see something like Scourge, which was removed in Path of Exile 1, but could find a place in Path of Exile 2 with Scourged maps and the like, as nodes on the actual Atlas? Are we going to get Bestiary and Incursion, which obviously are favorites of the developers, or are those going to be left behind forevermore? I feel like I might want to do some sort of tier list video on which leagues should make it into Path of Exile 2 as updated, revamped versions of themselves. Let me know in the comments if that would be something interesting that even you new players to Path of Exile would be interested in. I could explain all the leagues, talk about the good, the bad, and why it should make it or why it shouldn't make it into Path of Exile 2. Then Jonathan dropped a huge bomb. This first thing isn't it. All Path of Exile 1 cosmetics are confirmed to work in Path of Exile 2's 1.0 launch, but not all will work on early access release. However, on the early access release, there will be a completely new microtransaction store in Path of Exile 2, and it allows you to try on cosmetics before you purchase. It sounds like this might be a preview window of sorts, and I am so excited for this as someone who does like to play dress up. I don't necessarily buy a ton of cosmetics, but if they allow us to preview the supporter pack cosmetics via this window, on our characters, and if it looks like the console version of your character screen, I will be using it a ton, and I can bet you this is going to net grinding your games a ton of extra money. Their system in Path of Exile 1 as it stands now only shows you YouTube videos showcasing the cosmetics and nothing beyond that. This is more on par with modern games that really emphasize how you can change the way your character looks with these purchasable microtransactions. Honestly, I'm shocked it took them this long. He also said that shape-shifting forms like the bear, like the wolf that should be upcoming, like the demon on the witch is ascendancy, the infernalist, might have cosmetics in the future because, as you know, when you transform, you can't even see your armor cosmetics. So they've got to monetize people who are focusing on being in those forms some way. Jonathan then confirmed that up to 6-player co-op will be available right from the beginning of Path of Exile Early Access at the start of Act 1. Of course, as we know, you can resurrect your teammates, but in the endgame, this is no longer possible. They are trying to balance the game with both single player and multiplayer in mind, with there not being true advantages for one or the other, even though we all know multiplayer will have some sort of advantage, especially if you are optimizing your multiplayer experience. This is a game with a huge, sprawling economy. If you are all working in tandem to really manipulate the market, find the best items, sell all that stuff, kill the bosses as quickly as possible, multiplayer is going to be the way to go. But a lot of people, they just don't play like that. They like to play solo. That's how I like to play. That's how I'm going to play. And for the most part, you should be able to ignore those very small groups who are hyper optimizing the game. I would also like to note that he mentioned that he is the single player tester of the two game directors on Path of Exile 2, while Mark Roberts, the boss designer and one of the most influential developers on all of Path of Exile 2, also a game director, is testing a ton of the multiplayer aspects. So hopefully their insights should balance each other out. Then he also confirmed that the Mirror of Kalandra is returning in Path of Exile 2, and he confirmed that he has never found one in Path of Exile 1, unless he was using dev cheats. For brand new players, the Mirror of Kalandra is a currency item, the most valuable and the most rare item in all of Path of Exile, which allows you to mirror an item in game, which essentially allows you to make a copy of an item in game. People do this with the best crafted or best found items, and they're able to make multiple copies of them. It's pretty cool, and I still haven't found a mirror in the game myself. Then he also went into a bit of a tangent on unique items and the fact that all the uniques from Pinnacle endgame content or encounters should be chase items so that the players want to do these Pinnacle bosses, these Pinnacle forms of content like Simulacrum and Breachstones and the like. This is interesting because to balance this, to really make them all chase items, it's hard to do that without forcing players to use said items from these encounters. In a game like Path of Exile, where they really want many of the best items to be rare items, you don't necessarily want to have uniques be all best in slot gear. We have in Path of Exile 1 belts that are uniques are usually best in slot for many, I think the majority of the builds, but that's not true for any other armor slot. I don't think there's any other piece of gear that you equip on your character inventory that is almost always the best in slot gear. Really interested to see with all these different forms of Pinnacle content how they're going to accomplish this, because this was not the case in Path of Exile 1. He also reiterated that unique items do more interesting things in PoE2, which we already know, and that Mage Blood is not in Path of Exile 2 right now because of how they reworked flasks. Maybe it will be there in the future. There was no confirmation of this. One more point on Pinnacle encounters as well. He says in this interview that he thinks only the best of the best should be able to do the hardest content in the game, meaning it's aspirational, meaning not everybody will be able to beat these bosses at the end of the game, and that's what makes them special. Personally, I like that, but I can see a lot of players, especially new players, who are coming into the game expecting to be able to down everything in the game and being shocked when they're not able to. Jonathan also said he's totally fine with adding interesting features for the next 10 years, even if it ends up in content bloat, exactly what happened in Path of Exile 1. I never understood the argument of there's too much content in Path of Exile 1. I welcome everything because it just gives you different things to attempt and do with all that time in game. He also briefly mentioned that skills have video guides built in, but they are merely overviews of the skills. They don't want to go any deeper than that because they don't want to pigeonhole people into using skills a certain way. They want to encourage critical thinking and build creation and theory crafting. They don't want to be the sole sources of authority when it comes to using all these different skills. Jonathan also seems to think that melee is very, very strong and that a lot of bosses are easier to fight in melee because many of the dangerous abilities from bosses are only used while you're at range. We're going to have to see how this actually plays out. Remember, the only two real melee weapon options right now are quarterstaves, which are used by the monk most of the time, and then maces, which are associated with the ranger. Everything else in early access right now is ranged or spell focused. Of course, you can go into melee to use these things if you want to as well. But, well, you know what? I was going to say it's more dangerous, but according to Jonathan Rogers, being in melee is not more dangerous. So everybody, sorceresses, rangers, mercenaries, get your butts into melee range. He also mentioned something that piqued my interest here, that he wants to add a lore dictionary or encyclopedia into the game at some point, which would be awesome, some sort of journal, given how much more in-depth the Path of Exile 2 story seems to be, and how much more involved your character is in the world itself. He also said that you will never be able to simulate a build in the game client like you can in Path of Building, essentially running all the numbers for you, allowing you to create perfect gear and see what it would look like in game. That's just never going to happen. But they do like finding the developers who create these tools and bringing them in to see what they can offer at Grinding Gear Games because they already understand the game so well. He also confirmed a few little rapid fire things, haha, the meme. Roa mount will be in game, and it's the only mount currently in game. And of course, you can use ranged attacks on this, but if you are knocked off, if the Roa dies, the mount dies, you will be heavy stunned. Guilds are not currently combined for Path of Exile 1 and 2 due to some technical limitations. So given us, the Unhinged Exile Society, having a big Path of Exile 1 guild and prepping for Path of Exile 2, very curious to see how this is going to work. There's also no guild specific challenges because they don't want to force people to group up into a guild. And the interview essentially ended with Jonathan once again staying on the point that he needs to do all that is possible to prepare the servers for a monumental day one. Everyone, from how Jonathan sounds in all these interviews talking about the wave of people, a tsunami of Path of Exile 2 players, I am actually starting to get a little bit worried about the servers on day 1 and 2. I feel like we might be looking at over 500,000 on Steam alone, with maybe 1 million across all platforms. So as Ziggy D said in my Still Sane chat with him yesterday, lots more of those coming, by the way, and all of them have been great so far, all 12 of them. Ziggy said, prepare to do something else that day. Get ready to play another game. Maybe Grinding Gear Games will release the passive tree, and only then is it okay to look at it. If you're sitting there waiting in the queues, getting error exile or something as you wait to log in. And I do tend to agree with him. This interview was excellent, information packed, and Jonathan, as always, was very excited to answer all these great questions. Props to the people who did this interview, and props to Jonathan for doing interviews in lots of different languages. That's very, very cool that he's giving many different folks opportunities to learn more about Path of Exile 2, leading up to that December 6th launch. Now it's time to briefly talk about the Fextralife drama. We're going to start here on YouTube because this is where it all began. You might notice the screen says video unavailable. This video is private. That's because the video that sparked all of this has been privated. What was posted by a channel named Fextralife was a complete review of Path of Exile 2. From this video, we found out that traditional media outlets have been granted access, early access, to Path of Exile 2. And they've been able to play for an indeterminate amount of time. In this video review, Fextralife mentioned that he had played for 35 to 40 hours and had just finished Acts 1 through 3 of the campaign. This sparked outrage because Fextralife does not just do game reviews. Fextralife owns a wiki. And Fextralife does guides to games, complete walkthroughs, and they're posted on this wiki. And on this wiki, there are tons of ads for gambling. There are embeds to their stream on Twitch and YouTube. And it's a very scummy practice because you'll have 4 people actually watching Fextralife on YouTube, but it says there's 20,000 people watching the video because they're on the wiki that is very highly ranked in the Google search results. Now, why does this even matter at all? Well, it mattered enough to Path of Exile to actually release a statement about this, clarifying that there was no fault on Fextralife and that this was on them. So they say. They explain that they have given early access to a bunch of traditional media outlets. Let's talk about that term in a second. To allow them to create reviews on the game, opinions on the game, to help people determine whether or not they want to play the game. Fextralife, his first video, yeah, that was a review of the game. He said it was really good. Nothing was really spoiled in that. I mean, I didn't watch it, but it sounds like there was new footage, but nothing else was really broken by that review. It was a praise of the game. It was advising people, yes, this is a great game. Play it, okay? The problem lies with what he's doing and how he's going against exactly what Grinding Gear Games is saying here. They said they gave people access with this stipulation. They may share their opinions of the game, but are not allowed to produce guide-style content from this version that would spoil the discovery of the game or post unedited playthroughs. That is the key, and that is why not only viewers and just regular players are somewhat upset, but especially content creators who create these guides and put a ton of effort in are very upset. I think that Neversink did the best thread on all of this. He always has such level-headed takes, and even he is criticizing this situation incredibly sharply because it is robbing many of these content creators, and yes, even just regular players, the experience of figuring all this stuff out for themselves, of creating high-quality content from this game that is going to release, we thought, to the entire public on December 6th. Not just traditional media outlets got access. Fextralife is just one individual, okay? Maybe this is the only individual that is going to so firmly, one, break the NDA and then break what he promised to not do to Grinding Gear Games. Because if you look, his wiki has a bunch of guide stuff already on it. It has complete walkthroughs of Path of Exile 2 ready to go. You could see him editing it while he was actually playtesting the game or playing the early version of the game. And thankfully, this is not the actual version of the game that's going to go live on the 6th. It's not like he's on the League server or the Season realm. This is just the early access version. But let's go into what Neversink says about this situation. I just want to read through the thread really fast, get the highlights, because I think his take is the best. I want to elaborate why I dislike the Fextralife situation and criticize it so sharply. It's not even about the NDA or spoilers. It's about the wiki. Let's compare. Kiwi 1 wiki, Elden Ring Fextralife wiki. So here's the Path of Exile 1 wiki. Here is the Fextralife wiki. You can see tons of ads on Fextralife, videos, go directly to Fextralife's channel. A wiki is a community tool. Fextralife's Head Start allows them to prep data mined content, that's huge, prepare SEO, prepare content, to launch a vastly worse version of the wiki in hopes that the community will edit their wiki so that they will make ad, VIP, YouTube, Twitch money. I'm a content creator myself. Filterblade has some ads and a Patreon to keep the servers running and pay all costs. As a content creator, you need to strike a healthy balance of income versus content. The Fextralife wiki is on maximize income end of the stick, extremely. The Fextralife wikis are also not really community managed. The community has limited access. As a PoE player, I want to be able to Google a unique and end up in a good wiki with up-to-date content. I don't trust Fextra to provide this level of quality. This is especially true in PoE, a game that receives updates every couple of months. Since their Elden Ring wiki is outdated, a single-player game with rare updates, I just don't trust them to deliver good content in a live service game. And it's as simple as that. They are rushing in, they are breaking NDA, they are breaking the promises they made to Grinding Gear Games, all in pursuit of a quick It's total crap. Grinding Gear Games fell on their sword, did not blame Fextralife. I think maybe to save a little bit of face. Maybe. But I really hope that this individual and anyone they work with, Fextralife, does not get this sort of early access again. I truly hope that doesn't happen. Props to Grinding Gear Games for the transparency here, but big boo to Fextralife, who did not deserve that early access code, and I really hope his strategy does not work. Now, I briefly just wanted to talk about two classes that are releasing on early access launch and their power. It's the Mercenary, which you see on screen right now, and the Sorceress. I've been on the Still Stain podcast train and talking with a bunch of creators, and those include Ziggy D, whose video we are watching right now, and Subtractem, who did a video basically about this Sorceress and his time playing it a few days ago. Now, it sounds like the Mercenary is a little weak when you first start to play out with him, but do not fret. It's just because the playstyle of it is so different compared to pretty much everything else that we have experienced in Path of Exile 2 before. The Sorceress, more traditional. She makes more sense. Her playstyle is more similar to what we see in Path of Exile 1. But between these two, they have something in common, and I think every single class that we're playing, especially when early access first launches, you need to remember to keep this in mind when you are playing. It's the fact that they have ways to slow down enemies, to crowd control enemies. You're seeing it right now. The Executioner is being staggered with freeze and then being taken down massively by Ziggy D. The Sorceress has Ice Nova and supports that allow her to freeze enemies en masse with 1 or 2 presses of a button. When you log into early access, I think that when you're crafting your own build, you need to keep in mind that freezing enemies, stunning enemies, slowing them down, even packs, not just bosses, is going to be vital to your success. So look for skills that accomplish just that, no matter what you're playing. No matter what you're playing, the warrior, the monk, the sorceress, the merc, just remember you need to probably crowd control enemies to really survive in the game. And then there's this public service announcement. There appears to be another closed beta test for Path of Exile 2 between the 3rd of December and the 6th of December. Grinding Gear Games is probably doing some last-minute balance tests, some server tests, just making sure that everything, especially in the early game, runs well with their latest set of changes. So if you were a beta tester before, check your email. It seems like a lot of old beta testers are being called back for this final little round. This isn't confirmed directly from Grinding Gear Games. This is just from Reddit messages I've seen. Some people sent me messages on Discord and Twitter, so it does seem legit. If you are chosen once more to experience a little bit beforehand, congratulations. I'm glad that I still am going in pretty darn blind. I haven't played it since June of this year. There's been a ton of changes. I'm not probably going to play the class that I played in June, which was the monk. You are all choosing that class, which is going to be really fun. But anyone playing right now, have a great time. Now, I left the Path of Exile 2 Discord because of reasons, but Viperesque did not, and he is continuing to showcase a bunch of different mechanical informations and tidbits that aren't clear yet before we actually log in on December 6th. A few of them are pretty interesting, like this one. The thematic association for Druid are just scepters and staves, and of course shapeshifting, as well as a few other things here, like the fact that temporary minions do not reserve spirit, skills from ascendancies level up based on your character level, which is something that I suppose I should have known. This also happens with gem sockets. You get more gem sockets for your ascendancy skills and your default attack the higher level you are, because you obviously can't roll the gems to have more sockets with jeweler's orbs. This right here too, crits have no specific interaction with ailments like Ignite or Shock. They are more likely to inflict Ignite and Shock because they deal more damage, but that's it. There's a couple other things in this album right here. I will have the link in the description below if you'd like to take a look. But if you'd like these little tidbits and spoilers about PoE2 mechanics, you can join the Path of Exile 2 Discord on the official Path of Exile Discord server. Once again, my fellow exiles, thank you so much for watching. I cannot wait to log in on December 6th. I hope to see you all in game. If you haven't already, make sure you join our Discord. Make sure you like the video if you liked it, and to subscribe to the channel by hitting the sub notification bell too to get all the latest Path of Exile 2 content. I will see you in the next one. Kalakura, and stay sane, my fellow exiles.